Alright, chat. So, we're gonna be doing a review of Bayonetta 3, right? Because, the Khaiza's finished the game, right? He finished it on Saturday, right? Like last weekend. Practically like last weekend. We're at like Wednesday, right? But weeks go by so fast, so it feels like, okay, we just did this shit last week, right? Yeah, but Bayonetta 3, what? Oh, I thought that was, okay. But the Khaiza, oh wait, alright. The Khaiza has finished Bayonetta 3, and boy, oh boy, did I have like a blast, right, playing this game, right? Bayonetta 3, one of the games, one of the main like budgeted title games made by Platinum Games, well-known action game like video game company in Japan that are responsible for games, like Bayo 1 and 2, for example, since like Bayo 3 is the third title in the series. They also did Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is one of them, Wonderful 101, Astral Chain, excuse me, Astral Chain, and so many others in Platinum Games lineup. They are, in my opinion, the best like action game like developer out there, right? Albeit, there are companies out there that do it equally well, like Devil May Cry 5 from like purebred like Capcom, right? But yeah, just like, well, first of all, the history of like Platinum Games is that Platinum Games are made of ex-Capcom and ex-Clover employees, a subdivision of Capcom, right? One of them was one of the head ex-workers of Platinum Games is Hideki Kamiya, and Hideki Kamiya is responsible for the first 2 Devil May Cry games and was responsible for Resident Evil 2. Albeit, it was with producer Shinji Mikami, who was managing the project at the time, but Resident Evil 2 was Hideki Kamiya's baby. He was the one directing and calling the shots, right? Platinum released like Bayonetta 3, the third title in the titular action game female-like character, right? And Bayonetta had like a rough history, right? It was being in development from reports back at like before she was announced at the Game Awards. Bayonetta 3 was in like development hell for like almost 5 years. Almost 5 freaking years until like 2022. And when we got first new words of Bayonetta 3 from like possibly last year with that one Nintendo Direct, with that Nintendo Direct thing, I remember watching that with my boy Frank, and like I lost my shit because it was like a good trailer with a good fake out, because we both thought it was like Astral Chain, right? Because of that little mascot from the Astral Chain game, Laffy said. Lo and behold, it turned out to be Bayonetta 3 with a new look and a very striking resemblance to her childlike counterpart, or her past self, right? If you read up on like the lore and everything of Bayonetta, is Khaiza, right? And this is like a fresh new look on like the character. She's still sexy, she's still stylish, she's still whooping dudes like in the face, and we get to know more about like the enemies of Bayonetta throughout like the different trailers, and of course this game that we've completed. The enemies are homunculus, right? Man-made bioweapons, and their leader called the Singularity, right? And the Singularity is a entity that is trying to like wipe off the Bayonetta universe, or like wipe off the different like Bayonettas in different like universes, and like create like a new utopia or some shit, some anime bullshit like that, right? And so Bayonetta is summoned on the call, right? Via another protagonist that you get to play in this game called Viola, right? And Viola, well, probably save like the spoiler stuff for like later, but basically Bayonetta 3 is like the trinity where you get to play technically 3 different like characters in Bayonetta 3. Of course, you play Bayonetta herself, right? You get to play as the titular character, throwing down gun moves, picking up like Monster Hunter like esque weapons throughout the game, right? And you get to play as Viola, who is this like new chick in town, right? Carries like a katana, has like darts as like a gun, right? And she is just like a wonderful fucking personality of a character. Well, okay, let's just say that's spoilers, right? Viola is... Well, let's say this as like a spoiler, and then we'll get into like more spoiler stuff. Viola is Bayonetta and Luca's daughter, right? And if you have seen like my reaction trailers for Bayonetta 3, we were kind of like... The Khaiza was kind of like, you know, leaning on that like nose a little bit, that like Viola is like someone related to like Luca in some way. When Luca like picks her up by her chin, it's just like, hey, I know you, and like, wait a minute, wait a goddamn minute. It's like, oh, are they like father-daughter or some shit? Did Bayonetta and Luca fuck? Right? It was like, what? But anyway, Viola comes in from another universe of like the Bayonetta world, right? And in this game, right, I like this like little like thematic aspects to like these Bayonetta games, right? Bayonetta's one theme is about like finding like your past, right? Finding the origin of where you came from. And in Bayonetta 2, it's all about, you know, well, no, not finding your past, sorry. Finding yourself is Bayonetta's like core theme, right? Because, you know, Bayonetta, when you first are introduced to her, she is just this witch that has amnesia and doesn't know who she really is when she was like woken up from a casket by Luca's dad, right? Bayonetta 2 is about finding your past, right? And you get to see like what really happened with some lore events that you have read up upon in Bayo 1 that will lead you to like Bayo 2. You find out about Bayo's mom, Rosa. You find about Bayo's dad, Balder, who was originally the bad guy in Bayo 1, but it's like technically like a boss. Well, not a boss, sorry. Technically a playable character and a boss in Bayo 2, right? And Bayo 3 is all about like the multiverse shit, right? In this game, it was heavily marketed that you're going to be encountering different Bayonettas from different like universes, right? So you get to see like a Japanese like techno-pop Bayonetta, you get to see a Chinese dress Bayo, an Egyptian Bayo, a French Bayonetta, and so on and so forth. But they only like cap it off to like 4 because, you know, I guess like Platinum didn't have like the budget to like include more characters, something like that, right? And Platinum, right, you know, is a small developer studio in Japan. They're not like big league Nintendo joints, right? Where they're just like, you know, oh, we're happy that Bayonetta is out, but okay, let me just see other titles that we have in our lineup. Oh, we're gonna be counting Pokemon when it releases. Revolves around like the multiverse shit. You're gonna be encountering multiple different like Bayonettas, and in the game, well, spoilers, you get to see Bayo 1 and 2 as different like universe like counterparts, right? That's pretty badass, right? I really like this like thematic that they're going with here. As far as like gameplay is concerned, you get to control different characters, right? Bayo is obviously being one of them. She is like the titular character herself. You get to play as the main character. But you also get to play another character, and that's like Viola, which we mentioned as Luca and Bayonetta's like daughter from a different like timeline, different like universe, right? And she is a interesting character, right? Because we all know how Bayonetta works is that when you dodge at the right time at the exact moment, you get to have witch time, which is like this slow-mo field of area that you get to like mollywop on a motherfucker and get like good stylish points. Viola's witch time, she is an Umbra witch, but she activates it through a just block, right? She is like a just defend like type of like character, and so when you hit like block at the right time, it activates witch time, and you get to do like different things with like Viola, right? You get to do like sword skills, you get to do you get to toss your sword like literally Devil May Cry shit, where you know where Dante tosses like his sword or like his Sparta sword and it stays in one position while still like spinning. She has that ability in her. She doesn't have the traditional dodge that Bayonetta or John does, but rather she activates witch time via like block, and it's especially powerful if you have like Moon of Mahakala, very legacy accessory in Bayo 1 and 2, where it essentially is a like an analog stick parry in the direction of an enemy's attack, right? So combine that with fucking witch time, you're pretty much like fucking untouchable OD shit, right? But there's another thing that makes Bayonetta 3 so like interesting compared to the previous games before, and this is this new mechanic that they have been prompting and hinting at since like Bayo 1 and 2, and that's called the demonic slave, right? And you know, not like slave if you know what I mean, right? Just to like get that out there, but you literally can summon demons that you've made contracts in Bayonetta 3. So, for example, right? You know that big elephant motherfucker dog that Bayonetta summons mostly from time to time? Gamora? Yeah, she could summon that on a whim by spending her magic meter, and you could actually like control Gamora to do like attacks and special moves, right? So this was kind of like hinted at in like Bayo 2, and even more so in Bayo 1, that like it's an action game, right? And the whole idea for like Bayo 3 is that the action battles are getting like more intense, more like grandiose. There's a lot of shit that like you can do in this grand like battlefield. Why not make every battle like a fucking kaiju battle, right? And that's what the concept for Bayonetta 3 when Platinum was coming up with Bayo 3, the idea like was, right? We're gonna make our battles much more bigger, we're gonna make them badder, we're gonna have like Gamora like chew up a bitch from like out of nowhere, outside of like a cutscene or a QTE cutscene, and just go nuts, right? And so Bayo, throughout the course of the game, you get different contracts with different like demons, right? You get like Gamora, you get Madama Butterfly, you get like a bird creature, and also with like the demon contracts, you also get like a respective weapon of theirs, right? So for like Gamora, for example, again, you get like this like big like hammer like gun weapon called the G Pillar, and you could just like swing it down, hold down the button, and then it release like a blast shockwave. Do it again, and then like just be explosive with Bayonetta. It is fucking fun. And of course, like the weapon variety in Bayonetta 3 is like some of the most funniest like shit, right? Because Bayonetta 3 always had like weird weapons, like even back then in the first game. Like Bayonetta 1 had like, you know, gunchucks, like nunchakus mixed with like shotguns, right? So that was pretty OD, right? In here, they just went above and beyond. Like, you get like a hammer, you get like an engine like train sword, you get the classic like whips from Devil May Cry, Bayonetta 1. Not Bayonetta 1. You get the Alrune whip from Bayonetta 2, that one demon fight. You get like fans. You get like, oh, you get like a cape and a magic hat, right? You become like a fucking phantom thief sorcerer or some shit, right? So the weapon variety I really like in Bayonetta 3. Like, it has a lot of like flavor, it has a lot of like factor to it, right? It's not like big for the sake of like being big, right? Every weapon has like, you know, different abilities, right? And it's tied to like the mechanic with Demon Slave. Like, if you do like a combo ender with any of those like weapons, you get to press like the back button or the back trigger, the left trigger control at the right like flash of time, and then you can do like a combo finisher, right? So that's like really cool that you can like do some big like bombastic finishers like that. But that's like Bayonetta. The other character that you play as Viola, she has a demonic slave, which is her big fluffy cat called Cheshire. You activate like Cheshire, and he like attacks on his will, but it uses up your sword. So what happens is that not only is Cheshire fighting with you, acting on his own accord, but you control Viola and you get to do like hand-to-hand like combat. Like we seen like Viola doing some like JoJo shit, like doing like that's really cool. When I first found that out, I'm like, yo, baby girl, what you doing? Yo, what you doing JoJo shit, girl? Like, it's really fun seeing like a lot of different like characters in play. And speaking of another character, we get to play as John. Well, technically play as John, but you basically play stealth mission the game with John. And you get, I didn't like know this, but this is the stealth missions that John had were based on like a stealth game back in the day called like Elevator Action, right? Or something like that. I have no idea what that game is, but looking at like how I played John and looking at like the background of what that is, I was like, okay, I guess that's like where they got like reference from, so that makes sense, right? So you basically control 3 characters in 3 like different ways. 2 of them are really similar, whereas John, to an extent, to a fucking like extent, you don't really get to like play her, but you can in secret missions, but not to like the extent of like Viola or Bayonetta, right? That's not how it works, but like that is the way the game works, right? Now, we talked about like gameplay, right? Oh, right. Another thing about like the gameplay is like I like that how it's like paced, right? And what I mean by like pacing is that it's generally paced not in terms of like storyline, but like just general like action game like flow, right? Or at least like in Bayonetta terms, right? In Bayonetta 1 and 2, you fight a total of 3 battles, right? Or 3 missions. 1 is like an exploring, 2 is like exploring but fight some intense fights, and then 3, the 3rd mission is like your boss fight, right? And in this game, I said this a lot in those Bayonetta streams, there's a lot of shit to do, right? Especially on like the exploring part, right? There's so many like nooks and crannies in Bayonetta 3 that like if you played a lot of action games, you wanna like, you know, go back or sidetrack, do like different missions before progressing, so that you wanna get like everything filled. You wanna do everything the game secretly wants you to do. The game wants you to like finish the game and like enjoy yourself, but like, man, I played like a lot of action games, and like this action game is no different, and the action game is telling me, oh, go this way, ooh, take this piece of candy, don't take that candy, but take this piece of candy. Like before you take that piece of candy. Yeah, so it was like good because there's so much stuff, right? Like you get to find like umbral tears of blood, which are, you know, like the crows that you have seen in Bayonetta 1 and 2, but now there's like a crow, a cat, a toad, and if you collect like all 3, it unlocks like a side secret mission, or what were they called? Like phenomenal remnants, right? Phenomenal remnants are like these extra side missions that once you complete them, you get like good rewards. Like you get like an item that increases your health or increases your magic, or you get like an accessory that does this effect, or you might even like get a weapon in certain cases, in certain missions, right? So the game has a lot of like stuff, just like a lot of different shit that is in this game, right? And you know what? This is very kind of like similar to Devil May Cry 5, right? Even though like I played a lot of Devil May Cry 5, I did almost everything in there. It's not to the extent of like Bayonetta 3, but as I'm like saying this, like looking back at it and picturing it in my head, like man, Devil May Cry 5 has like a lot of shit to it, right? There's a lot of stuff that you can just like break and like collect and like find secret missions via like your optical like lenses and all that shit, right? So the game is just like so Bayonetta 3 is just like similar to Devil May Cry 5, where it's just like chock full of stuff. Not only in terms of like exploring, but also there are other similarities between Devil May Cry 5 and Bayonetta 3, where it's like the action battles are going to be a little bit more intense, right? There's going to be a lot more different mechanics that you are going to do in this like action game, right? Have a blast, right? So the game is like, it's really fun, right? That's for gameplay side. Now for like story, right? For spoilers, right? We talked about like a little bit brief spoiler stuff at like the beginning of this review, but like this is an action game, right? And what are action games usually like tend to focus around? Like the big like high octane sequences that happen in an action game, and they could be like anything that you want to have to be in like in an action game, right? Ranging from like cinematic, not cinematic cutscenes, like QTEs to like big giant like big giant battles, right? And you know, some of those like boss battles are like really goddamn awesome because they offer a weird fucking gimmick. You get to play like RTS with an enemy, or like you get to blow bubbles at a bitch, or like it's just so much like variety, right? But oh, that's another gameplay thing. My bad. I forgot to like include that, right? But anyway, it's included now, right? But it's an action game, right? A lot of high stakes like smoke and mirrors, right? A lot of like shit that is just like upfront, like in your face, so much like off the rails kookiness, but it doesn't make like the story any much like sense, right? And I could forgive that, right? Because like action games, they're not there to tell you like a cohesive like story, right? They're not there to like actually like give you some material that like it's like a Kingdom Hearts, where like if you look back hard enough, maybe this is the clue that you want, or maybe this is like an epilogue for something more. No, it's an action game. Why would I be concerned about Bayonetta's like story until like now? And the reason why I say this is because the story is like kind of loose in a bad way. Like it's all over the place. Like it's not really like all over the place, but it's just like, man, what the fuck is what? Yeah. So like, remember how I like talked about the homunculus and shit like that, right? So there's this like person named Sigurd something, right? Dr. Sigurd, and Viola comes in the intro of Bayonetta 3 to warn Bayonetta that the singularity is coming and that you need to help like Dr. Sigurd, right? And little did we know, Dr. Sigurd is the singularity, the evil dickhead, the homunculus boss behind all the shit that's been happening in Bayonetta 3, which I called in a trailer, which I called in the launch trailer before, 2 weeks before the game was like coming out. I was like, okay, this old man, we don't know nothing about you. We know that you're gonna be like some evil dickbag, because that's like the trend of Bayonetta, is like you have this old creepy, cringly like old man, right? That's gonna be plotting shit behind the scenes, right? We've seen this with Baldur in Bayonetta 1. We've seen this with the Space Poncho Man in Bayo 2. This is no different, and lo and behold, I was right. That fucking cocoon pod wheelchair motherfucker is the singularity, and we technically find out at the very end of Bayonetta 3. We didn't know about him before, we just know him as the singularity, and when you look back after finishing it now, it's like, oh, he's the one behind all this shit, right? But it's like, where did that fucking come from? Where did that come from, of all places, right? Like, just out of nowhere, just say like, oh, I'm gonna betray you. Bink! Stab John in the back of the... stab John in the back. Bink! Like, your time is over, bitch. Bye. Like, what? And I get it. Like, it's trying to like rinse and repeat the elements that what was happening in Bayonetta 1, where it's like this like evil dickhead like voice talking shit to you, whether it be in your head or like up front in your face, like Bayo 3, right? And arise, my child, for the Jubileus the Creator shall give you guidance, or like some shit like that. And you know, it's heavily ripping off like those vibes, right? And this is where I like give like a difference between Bayonetta 2 and Bayonetta 3, is that we knew who the Poncho guy was, right? We saw him, right? He wasn't like hiding in the shadows, but we could explicitly like see him, and we could like see him. We battled him like in the middle of the game before fighting him as a final boss, right? So that's where I give like a little bit of difference between Bayo 2 and Bayo 3. It's just like the bad guy in Bayo 2 is just like out there, right? He makes his presence known, whereas in Bayo 3, like, he's just hiding in the shadows, and we know who he is, but we get to see the reveal, like, way late into the game. Like, this is some, like, Bayo 1 shit. Again, not bad, but, like, fuck, dude. Like, come on now. I've seen this before in Bayo 1. Come on, Platinum, you're better than that. And also, another thing is romance. Right, you know, like boy meets girl, girl meets boy, vice versa, and so on and so forth. Where the fuck did this, like, Luca and Bayonetta ship come from? Right, like, I don't mean, like, in a bad way that, like, you can have, like, a ship, it's totally fine, it's totally, like, normal, right? But, like, and of course, it was like speculated at Bayo 1, at Bayo 2, right? Luca has like a hard-on for, you know, Bayonetta, right? Not only in terms of like just how pretty she looks, but like Luca story-wise hunts down Bayonetta in Bayo 1 because he thinks she's the reason his father died, and it was later found out that like Baldur created that shit by sending angels, and they ripped his like fucking limbs off. Right? So Luca was much more like hunting him down like a journalist would, and just wanted to seek like answers to the truth. Right? And of course, like, Bayonetta is the female Dante in the sense that, like, she's battle sexual, right? She doesn't have any, like, romantic, like, interests at all, right? Of course, she has, like, feelings when she has a mother persona when she, like, sees that her past self is in trouble and takes care of her like a mother would, and has that shit in Bayo 2 when she looks out for that little kid called that Yu-Gi-Oh looking motherfucker Loki with the Millennium Puzzle and shit like that. She has this mother persona, right? And it can be also hinted at that she is like part lesbian, right? Because she goes through the whole route of Bayonetta 2. She goes through the whole route of Bayonetta 2, like trying to find John's soul because the demon world snatched her soul, and the whole mission is just like to rescue her before time runs out. So there was flirtation in Bayo 1 and 2 between Bayonetta and Luca, right? But it was like playful flirtation, and you know, Bayonetta sees Luca as like the only person that can like impress Bayonetta from time to time. Even though like Luca is the character archetype of that good-looking but clumsy bitch that doesn't get the girl, right? He's this suave motherfucker that like knows how to schmooze the ladies, but is very like, well, not awkward, but he is like clumsy. He like steps on a tic tac and then like as he's about to make his Batman getaway and shit like that, right? He's a very comical fucking character, right? And that's what like the idea behind that was what the idea behind Dante was, is that he's this suave motherfucker but doesn't know how to doesn't know how to pull the ladies in, you know what I mean, right? Like where did this romance like blossom from? Like this Bayo Luca ship like came out of fucking nowhere, right? Throughout like Bayo 1 and 2, Bayonetta sees like Luca as like a friend, right? Like like sometimes even like an ally. Like she humors him, right? But where did this fucking idea of a Bayonetta cross Luca like come from? And that's like just bad romance development, right? This shit like came out of nowhere, and it kind of like irks me in a way, right? Because like Bayonetta is just this like character that does like battle-sexual shit, but has no interest for the other sex. Not even for like, well, and not even for like the same sex, right? But like, what? Where the fuck? I'm so confused. I'm so like, just thrown off. Like, I mean, it's okay, but like, Bayonetta is like a character that exudes like, you know, the female like badassery, and that in my eyes, right, when you have like a female like girl character who's very like, you know, she can put herself up in no time flat. She can like compose herself, and she could get into the heat of battle, right? Gives me like vibes of like fucking Ruby Heart. Killed that angel thought. Like Ruby Heart is badass because she is a badass like female pirate in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Then there's like fucking Ripley from Aliens, right? Like she's a badass like woman character that like gets the job done, and is a smart fucking character in a horror like sci-fi film series, until like the movies went down in a very like, what the fuck kind of direction did they go with in Resurrection in 3? Like it's just a romance that was just like thrown into the heap just to like make another like theme about it, right? And you see that at the end with like Bayonetta like on the verge of death by the singularity. Luca saves her. And that's another thing, like Luca becoming a werewolf because he's mad at his inability to like help others or some shit like that. I'm like, what? And then we found out he was like possessed by something called like the Arc Adam, right? Arc Eve is like all the Bayonettas, and Arc Adam is all of like the Lucas, right? So they were literally playing like Adam and Eve like bullshits, right? And that still is like, why is Bayonetta suddenly found feelings for Ruka? Right? Like, what? Where did this come from? And I'll tell you what, it's like, I don't think like Kamiya, as much as like I respect the man, even though at like some occasions can write like a romance, right? Like, it's kind of like, you know what it is, right? To all the Metal Gear Solid fans out there, right? Remember Metal Gear Solid 4, where Meryl was supposed to be like in love with like Solid Snake, or in Metal Gear Solid 4's timeline, Old Snake, right? And Meryl, after Metal Gear Run, dumped Solid Snake because the Les Enfants Terribles project is where, like, you know, where Solid and remember Metal Gear Solid 4, Chad, right? Where Meryl had like a deep infatuated crush on Solid Snake at the end of like during the course of Metal Gear 1 and at the end of Metal Gear 1. But after Metal Gear Solid 1, we find out that like Meryl dumped Solid Snake's ass because of the Les Enfants Terribles project, and it made like Solid Snake sad because from the Les Enfants Terribles project, it's like a genome soldier project, a genetic soldier project, and it's later found out that like Snake has no junk, right? He has like no dick, and right, like Meryl was kind of like disappointed in Snake because of his like no dick, right? And then we jump to like Metal Gear Solid 4, where like she still harbors some feelings for Solid Snake, but then Snake is like, no, I don't want to tap that ass anymore. But then out of nowhere, the comic relief character, right, that is Johnny Sasaki from Metal Gear Solid 1. Remember that guy that he always had like a mud butt problem? He always need to go to the toilet, to the shits? He marries Meryl. Meryl suddenly developed the love for Johnny Sasaki, and they get married in like in an air bunker. Where the fuck was that relationship hinted like at all? Where did Meryl get the hots for Johnny fucking Sasaki, the mudbutt character, the comic relief character of Metal Gear 1 at all? Like, are you fucking serious? It's literally like just forced like romantic like plot, right? And it was bad romantic plot because that shit like came out of like nowhere. Yes, Johnny Sasaki saved like Meryl from like a fucking like what was it? A explosion at like some event in Metal Gear Solid 4, like in Paris or some shit. But Meryl had like no fucking interest in Mudbutt Man, and all of a sudden she gets like married with Johnny Sasaki? The fuck is that shit? And this is where I find like some like gripe with Bayonetta 3 is like, where did this relationship come from? Where was this romance coming from? So like in story-wise for Bayonetta 3, like, you know, plot doesn't make, you know, much sense. Like, I get it, you have a big bad guy and all that shit like that, but we find out at the later end, so it feels like Bayonetta 3's like plot twists was just very like thrust upon near the very end. Right? It's like, okay, I guess. And then of course, you know, the shipping thing, which I don't like. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but like, still, Bayonetta's a strong, independent woman. Where was this? Where was this like romance to begin with? But as far as like story stuff is concerned, There's also like another gripe I have, right, with Bayonetta 3, and that is the Switch. Right, Bayonetta after like Bayo 1, Platinum pitched like Bayonetta 2 as, you know, this is like historical insight. Platinum pitched Bayonetta 2 and Bayonetta 3 to Nintendo. Or, well, Platinum pitched Bayonetta 2 to Nintendo because, you know, the Wii U was coming out and like Nintendo was like, we have no idea what other games can we pitch into the Wii U, until it was like at the later end of the cycle with Smash Wii U, Donkey Kong Country Freeze, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, so on and so forth. And there was even like quotes of this, right? If Platinum didn't if Nintendo didn't fund like Bayonetta 2, there would be no Bayonetta 2 at all, right? And the same thing goes for Bayonetta 3, right? Bayonetta 3 wouldn't have exist if Nintendo hadn't, like, you know, given them the funds they needed to develop and create Bayonetta 3, right? And the only problem with Bayonetta 3, at least on like a technical level, is that Switch hardware is pretty fucking ass. Right? Like, Bayonetta 3 is like a pinnacle action game, right? And you see that, right, with smooth, like, with quote-unquote smooth 60 frames per second like combat with Bayonetta, but, well, the cutscenes are hard-locked 30 FPS, but like, when you're playing in-game, when you're like looking at environments or like fighting homunculus like dudes, it starts to like dip in some places. Like, even I like noticed that, like, okay, the frame rate's kind of like dipping a little bit in Bayonetta 3. I don't know why, right? And it's because of like the Switch hardware, right? Switch hardware can only do like so much in that like tiny fucking like little thing, and right? And I feel like the Switch hardware is kind of like undermining the best experience that Bayonetta 3 can have, right? It just like I want to enjoy like a game to like the bestest of like qualities, right? You know, hardcore like 60 FPS through and through, even with like, you know, cutscenes. Like, Switch hardware is good for like games like, you know, Smash Brothers and all that shit, right? And that's like without like netcode and all that shit. If you play like local, you could have like this best Smash experience. But like, man, some games Switch shouldn't really like run on it, right? At least like I always argue that like fighting games shouldn't run on the Switch to begin with, unless it's like Smash Brothers. You look at like Mortal Kombat on MK11, the most graphically intensive Mortal Kombat there is. It's like, woof, what the fuck? I played Power Rangers Battle for the Grid on that thing, and like some effects don't look flashy at all compared to like the PC or the PlayStation versions on Nintendo Switch, right? And that's even on toaster mode. If you take the Switch out of the toaster, it gets even worse, right? Like, I wish there was like a Switch 2, right? Like a Switch 2.0 or Switch Pro. But it feels like Nintendo is not doing that. Either they're lazy, right? Or they're just like, I think it's just like maybe lazy. There's no like or, right? Because we should have gotten like an upgrade to the Switch like at best like maybe 2 or 1 year ago. But instead, Nintendo is like pumping out like Nintendo Indie Directs or like Nintendo Directs on upcoming projects for their like future games. They're putting out like Pokemon like next month. No, not next month, sorry. In the following days, or like maybe in a week from now. What the fuck y'all doing making like new games when the Switch hardware is kind of like whack ball stupid? Right? Like, that chip is fried. The Joy-Cons honestly fucking drift, and performance And performance in Nintendo Switch is just like medium at best. It's not even like great quality you get on like a PC or some shit. The only way to like play Bayonetta is through like an emulator like Yuzu, and even then, like sometimes like Yuzu can like crash because of emulation, right? It's not like perfectly like through and through, but god damn, man, I wish that like I wish that Platinum was like their own independent studio, right? Like I wish that they could be self-sufficient enough to not rely on Nintendo, right? As much as other people really like Nintendo games, right? I'm not a big Nintendo fan, right? I just like the games that like they have, but I'm not gonna automatically say that like I'm a Nintendo shill where I immediately know for a fact that like I know Bayonetta's my favorite fucking series there is, known for their like crazy action like bullshits, right? But it's hindered by like Nintendo and that bullshit, right? Like, come on now. I wish like Bayo 2 and Bayo 3 could be on like the PC, just like Bayo 1 was, so that we could get like a good like performance boost from these like games, but we can't because Bayo 2 and Bayo 3 are officially licensed Nintendo products, so we won't see that shit officially on Steam or something like that, right? Which is fucking ridiculous. Fucking ridiculous that we have to like go through emulation hurdles to play like the best like Bayonetta experience. It's an option that's out there, right? I'm not like dissing anybody who wants to use Yuzu, but I want to get like the best experience with no issues or hurdles, right? Like, and Bayonetta 3 is like a peak action game, right? You get to do crazy shit like dodge offset and Muna Mahakala and all that bullshit, but you don't get to do it at all with the Switch's hardware, right? Right, so that's like another gripe. And the last thing, and I'll probably like tip it off here until like I go to dinner. It's all the bullshit that's been going on with like Helena Taylor and the voice acting industry, right? As much as like that shit is like over now, but it did have like some regard with like the development process for Bayonetta, and like she blatantly said that I got absolutely little pay for voicing this character that I've become well famed for, and the company's like offered me like $4,000, because first of all that's a lie, right? She actually fucking lied on an open Twitter space. That where did she get 4,000 from? Where did she get this flat rate? Where did she also get this numerical data instrument that Bayonetta has sold 450,000 units, and that does not include merchandise, right? Like, okay, there's some like shaky waters here and there, right? And it was later found out that like Platinum did offer more money, where they were gonna offer Helena Taylor to voice the character in 5-hour sessions, each one costing $3K, which altogether could have made like $15,000. But she still stands her ground and says like, no, this is not what I was told. This is not what I was aware of. That is a blatant lie. I'm still gonna boycott Bayonetta 3 and give that money to like charity. I'm like, you're not drawing up a good picture for my fictional character over here, right? Because historically, Bayonetta has been through the short end of the stick a lot, as a character and as a series, right? Because as a series, right, it's a little project made by a little company, right? And it could like barely make like enough money, and that's why they were like Platinum was in like development hell for Bayonetta 3, because like it took them so long, right? They don't have enough funds like what Nintendo has with all their like $6 million per year salary, right? Like, no, not 6 million, that's a gross estimate, but like 650,000 per year on a salary. It's like, fuck you, Nintendo. Come on now. Elena Taylor's thing sparked like a voice acting like revolution, but we later found out that it was a lie, and that voice acting revolution was null and void. It's still a problem that exists, but, you know, she did it in the wrong way at the wrong time. And she was, in my opinion, and I've talked about this with friends, she was just trying to get more money and more clout, right? Is basically what she was, like, trying to enact here, which is like, what the... Come on now. You're that, like, petty when you actually got the same, like, wages that you got for voicing Bayonetta in 1 and 2? Helena Taylor? Come on now. Like, I'm sorry to be, like, rude and offensive, but, like, come on now. There's a lot of, like, these layers, and that's what I saw when I first saw this, like, discussion, right? There's a lot of, like, these layers, right? And we have to expose all those layers. You can't just, like, accept, your words for what it is, albeit, you know, very profound and shocking, but, like, there's more to this story that meets the fucking eye. And and we later found out that Helena Taylor was lying. She still insisted on boycotting Bayonetta 3 money to charity, right? But I got the game. I got the big box edition. I enjoyed the game for what it is. Jennifer Hale is not a bad voice actress, and I'm not gonna diss on the game for all the other potential voice actors that are in there. I said this too much. I'm gonna stop. Right, I'm gonna stop. I realized what I was saying, and I'm like crying a fucking river over here. I've said this like 10 goddamn times. I'm sick of this now. All in all, right? There are a few gripes that happen with Bayonetta 3, right? I can somewhat forgive a few of them, but overall, Bayonetta is a fun action game. Like, I feel like this is like the peak action game series that we are getting, right? And we are not only getting like Bayonetta 3, but we're also getting like God of War. Oh, and that's another thing, right? There's another gripe I have with like Bayonetta 3, right? As much as I love the game, right? God of War is actually out, right? Like, November is God of War time and Pokemon time, right? Because like, that's gonna be the new like Scarlet and Violet, whatever the fuck. Oh no, it's not Scarlet or Violet. Yeah, it is called Scarlet and Violet. What am I saying? And Bayonetta is gonna be overshadowed by those two. Albeit, you know, God of War is an action game too, right? But God of War is like one of those legendary like icons that you remember right off in your head. You remember God of War back on the PS2. This like This rage-infused monster that was betrayed by the gods and is slaying the gods. Hence, like, the God of War, right? And I mean, of course, there's, like, lore reason, but, like, Kratos is, like, one of those iconic, characters next to other, like, video game icons, like Mario and Zelda and shit like that. Oh, maybe not to that, like, level, but, like, Kratos is, like, up there, right? Everybody knows Kratos if you grew up playing God of War when you were a kid, when you were forbidden to buy those games from your mom or dad. It's like, oh, God of War is too violent, little Timmy. You better put that shit back at the GameStop shelf right now. But Mom, I want God of War. Too bad. No. Yeah, and like the other thing is like Pokemon, right? Pokemon is another like legendary icon, even more so than like Kratos, and is equally a legendary icon like Mario and Zelda. Everybody loves Pokemon, right? And I always dread this like fucking notion, or like dread this like pattern that I have with some of my like favorite games coming out, right? When you have a game like Bayonetta 3 that the Khaiza personally loves, right? They're going to be overshadowed by other popular games that will be like coming out before or after, right? Like Bayonetta 3 is going to be overshadowed by God of War Man, who has earned like early reviews of 10s out of 10s or 9s out of 10s, right? In Metacritics and all around the world. And of course, that is going to be overshadowed by Pokemon because everybody loves collecting little shits and like using those shits to do PvP, right? It's like, this is the exact same thing that I had when KOF 15 came out. It was sandwiched between Horizon Zero Dawn and Elden Ring, another Game of the Year contender, right? And I'm just like, man, I wish some of these like games that I am really hyped up for, right, would just like come out where there's like no competition, right? And honestly, right, competition is good. Competition is what, you know, breeds like game companies to push for that drive to like do better and be better, right? But there's like obvious fucking competition that like, you know, compare Bayonetta to like, you know, Pokemon, well, first of all, to God of War, it's like, they're both action games, but you know, Kratos, right? And then of course, if you compare Bayonetta to Pokemon, it's like way here, like Pokemon is like right here. Everybody loves Pokemon. That makes me fucking upset, right? Like, I watched Pokemon when I was a kid. I've watched like the early OG series. I have played some of their games. They're just not my cup of tea. But it sucks that like some of my favorite games, like that I am really like passionate about, is going to be like overshadowed by like all this stuff, right? And that's why like I wish like games would have, like, I use this example, like the Guilty Gear Strive treatment, right? Like Guilty Gear Strive was an anticipated fighting game that I really was getting into, right? And it came out at a month where I feel like nothing was happening. Nothing. 2021 was a good year for Guilty Gear because Guilty Gear popped off. Everybody was playing Guilty Gear. Everybody and their mama in the FGC was playing Guilty Gear. And then other fighting games came around, like DNF Duel and KOF 15. And now we're gonna see like a resurgence of fighting games, right? Now with like the upcoming release of Street Fighter 6. I hope Street Fighter 6 does not come around as some other baby fucking, I'm getting mad over this, but fuck it. I hope Street Fighter 6 doesn't come out with some like baby ass Animal Crossing like bullshit. I swear to God, I want fighting games. I want the games that I like to like pop off for like at least like 2 months. Can I have that, please? Can I at least like have like a game where like there's no fucking collateral competition from all these other horseshitters out there? I want this game to like shine, and that's where I want it to be, you know? Like, come on. Come on. You know? Okay. Damn, that pissed me off internally. I gotta like go down and dinner and eat. But yeah, like I hate that shit. It's a personal like peeve of mine where like I want these like games to like be good, and like everybody should be like talking about this game for like that word of mouth and like get that game to like spread. But like how can it when other like games that are already well known in the video game industry like Pokemon and like other shits are like getting much more fame and like popularity, right? Everybody loves Pokemon. It's a little bit unfair. It's a little bit unfair to like Bayonetta because it's like a small like action game that gives you more like oomph. That gives you like that oomph factor. Well, but then again, in all of this, right, I could cry a river about like my personal like grievances, but like, you know, every person is different. I like fighting games and action games. Another person likes Pokemon way more. Another person likes Pokemon way more, and that's okay. That's the world we live in. That's humanity in a fucking nutshell. We are all individuals with individual likes and dislikes. I can't force anybody to like a fighting game or an action game, right? If you force someone to like what they like, then you're doing it wrong. You're not getting that game spread. You're just being an asshole about it. And like I felt that just now. I was angry, right? But I can't like force it. Despite how much unfairness it is, I gotta be level-headed. But anyway, that's Bayonetta 3, right? Fantastic game. A little bit of like looseness here and there, but it is a great game for what it's worth. I personally give it like a 9 out of 10. If I were to like judge it like critically, I would say like an 8. But like the 9 is like really besting me in there because, you know, the Khaiza loves Bayonetta, the Khaiza loves action games, so I'm gonna keep my bias score with the 9 out of 10. I wish it was on something else besides the Switch, but like I can't, beggars can't be choosers, right? That's why I'm hoping that like maybe Platinum can be its own studio and like not go through this shit with Nintendo, and just like make games at their own accord and pay voice actors at their own accord, right? But yeah, that's Bayonetta 3. Pretty fun.